If you walked into like a hospital ward today and you looked at the medical charts of patients admitted for extreme burnout or, stress-induced heart conditions, you'd probably expect a certain type of person.
Right. You'd assume you're going to find people who just absolutely hate their jobs.
Exactly. You'd think you'd find people who are just chained to a desk against their will, totally miserable. But you don't. That is completely not what the data shows.
No, it's actually the exact opposite, which is wild.
It really is. Instead, you find people who love what they do. I mean, you find people who are so deeply attached to their mission or their startup or their career trajectory that they literally work themselves into organ failure.
Yeah, it's a terrifying paradox. We've somehow engineered this culture where the ultimate reward for doing your job perfectly is that the job physically breaks you.
Right. And this is the craziest part. The moment it breaks you, a secondary industry just swoops right in to sell you this very expensive version of, like, peace.
Oh, absolutely. A highly monetized piece.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on a topic that directly impacts every single working adult every single day. We're looking at this incredibly intense, frankly exhausting debate between what we broadly call hustle culture and what we call the wellness or, anti-hustle movement.
It's the most tired debate in modern work culture, honestly.
Oh, totally. And our mission for this deep dive is going to be a bit different. We are not taking the cheap route here. We're not going to just pick a side for clicks.
Thank goodness, because that's what everyone does.
Right. We aren't going to mock the 5 a.m. optimizers as joyless, caffeine-addicted robots. And we aren't going to mock the mindfulness crowd as fragile drifters who are just afraid of hard work.
Because that doesn't actually solve anything.
Exactly. Instead, we're going to dissect the uncomfortable truth that both of these sides are actually guarding half of a wisdom that was never meant to be divided in the first place.
That is the crucial framing for what we're about to do.
Yeah.
Because the fight itself, this modern idea that you have to choose a tribe, that you must align with extreme productivity or extreme detachment, that is the fundamental error.
Yeah.
What we are actually looking at, when you peel back all the rhetoric, is a single, highly profitable ecosystem. And it thrives purely on us swinging wildly between these two extremes.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want you, listening right now, to picture your typical Tuesday morning.
Oh boy, the Tuesday morning scroll.
Yep. You wake up, you roll over, and you open up a social media app. Instantly, you receive two totally contradictory sermons delivered back to back.
Literally within seconds of each other.
Right. So sermon number one hits you first. It's a 60-second video of a guy probably wearing a watch that costs way more than my car, standing in front of a microphone.
With that harsh lighting.
Yes, harsh lighting. And the music is this driving, aggressive synth beat. And he is just preaching the gospel of compound interest, stacking habits, and rising before the sun.
The leap is for the weak, right?
Exactly. The core message is relentless. It's like your circumstances are just excuses wearing a disguise. The world belongs to those who outwork the competition. And if you aren't grinding, you are falling behind.
And we have to acknowledge how effectively that sermon is delivered. It comes with absolute unshakable conviction.
It really does. It's hypnotic.
It dominates the keynote stages of every industry conference. It floods the business bestseller lists. The underlying premise is that Monday morning is a privilege, not a punishment, and your body is simply an engine that requires more discipline.
Spot on. But then, literally 2 swipes later, maybe a minute later, you're scrolling on the exact same device, on the exact same app, and you get sermon number 2.
The total aesthetic shift.
It's jarring. Now it's pastel colors, very calm, natural lighting. You've got some lo-fi soothing beats in the background. Someone is sitting on a plush rug holding a mug of tea.
Probably matcha.
Definitely matcha. And the message is, slow down, protect your peace, set your boundaries. You are not a machine, and the people demanding that you operate like one are just exploiting your trauma.
Right. It's all about how your worth is not defined by your output.
Exactly. Delivered with the exact same absolute conviction as the hustle guy.
Yeah, this is the great letting go, the softness rebellion. But here's the piece of the puzzle that should really trouble us as consumers of this information.
What's that?
Both of these sermons are being consumed by the exact same audience. You are the target demographic for the high-intensity grind and the high-priced retreat.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. I get ads for both constantly.
Right. And the most difficult part for people to reconcile is that both of these sermons, at their absolute core essentials, are correct.
Which just feels completely impossible. Like, how can two completely opposing worldviews both be right?
It's counterintuitive, for sure.
So, to understand how these two sides manage to trap us in this endless ping pong match, we have to start by actually giving each one its full, honest due. We have to understand the mechanics of why they work before we can see how they eventually destroy us.
Right. We have to look at the engine.
Exactly. So let's start with the much maligned concept of the grind, hustle culture.
What's fascinating here is that to take the grind seriously, we first have to deliberately strip away the caricature.
The crypto bros.
Exactly. We have to separate the underlying medicine from the quack salesmen who are currently peddling it. Because when the average person thinks of hustle culture today, they picture a very specific avatar.
Yeah, the 22-year-old renting a private jet by the hour for a photo shoot.
Preaching about passive income while producing absolutely nothing of societal value.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I need to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Are we sure we aren't just giving toxic capitalism a free pass here? Like, when I look at hustle culture, I don't just see a caricature. I see a highly manipulative system.
It can definitely be manipulative.
Right. I see a few lottery winners, people who got lucky with an algorithm or a bull market, telling millions of exhausted, underpaid people that if they just work 18-hour days, they'll be rich too. Isn't that just massive survivorship bias?
Well, the survivorship bias is absolutely real.
It feels like we're mistaking stimulants for ambition, you know, and mistaking sheer volume for wisdom. What about the 99% who grind their gears to dust and have nothing to show for it?
That is exactly the pushback that the anti-hustle movement relies on. And it's completely valid if we are only looking at the worst actors.
Okay, fair point.
But judging the entire concept of a strong work ethic by its worst influencers on the internet is, well, it's intellectually lazy.
So what's underneath it then?
If we strip away the rented Lamborghinis, the obnoxious flexing, all of that, we are left with the load-bearing claim of hustle culture. And that claim is mathematically and historically profound. Your outcomes respond to your effort far more than your excuses will admit.
I mean, that sounds great on a motivational poster, but explain that mechanism to me. How does that actually manifest in reality, especially when the deck is stacked against so many people?
It manifests through the reality of agency. Agency is the absolute foundation of any forward movement. The truth of human endeavor is that nobody builds anything, not a business, not a skill, not a healthy family, by waiting for conditions to be perfect.
Right, because they never are.
Exactly. The market is never perfectly certain. You never have as much capital or free time as you want.
Yeah.
The competition is always fierce.
There's always a reason to wait.
Always. There is always a highly logical, completely plausible, socially acceptable reason to just wait one more quarter before taking a risk. But the hustle canon teaches a very specific psychological reframing.
Which is?
It teaches that this plausible reason to wait is almost always just a negotiation with your own fear.
Okay, that is a really sharp distinction. Fear is essentially a counterparty sitting across the table from you, offering you a deal to stay comfortable.
And you don't have to take the deal.
Right. I remember reading Napoleon Hill's book from the 1930s, Think and Grow Rich. It has that famous, almost cliche line, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve.
Ah, classic.
And sure, it's a massive overpromise like, plenty of highly conceived things fail miserably. But the psychological posture underneath it is what matters.
Yes, the posture is everything.
The person who assumes their outcome is movable is simply going to take more swings,
Right.
and therefore move more outcomes than the person who assumes their fate is fixed.
Exactly. That posture is why 90 years of self-help literature essentially echoes that one observation.
We need to look at what this worldview actually disrupted historically.
What do you mean?
Well, for most of human history, the operating doctrine of the world was knowing your place.
Oh, like a caste system or aristocracy?
Yes. The universal assumption was that ability and success were bestowed at birth. You were either born into the right aristocracy with the right pedigree and connections, or you weren't. You were born the kind of person who commanded a room, or you were born to be part of the audience. And that doctrine of knowing your place wasn't just a cultural norm. It was a massive, highly enforced gatekeeping mechanism to keep power consolidated.
Precisely. So hustle culture, for all its occasional vulgarity and cringe-worthy TikToks, is actually a sustained, aggressive assault on that gatekeeping.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
It looks at the kid with the wrong accent, the kid with zero legacy connections, the kid from a town nobody's heard of, and it says, these things are just skills.
Like negotiation or coding?
Exactly. Negotiation, leadership, financial literacy, coding, even charisma, they're all just learnable skills. And the tuition you pay to acquire them isn't an Ivy League degree. The tuition is deliberate, unglamorous practice.
I can actually see how that is deeply hopeful. It's saying the manual exists, you just have to be willing to read it and do the work.
And we see this play out in the real world constantly.
We really do. If you look at the most Darwinian, hyper-competitive meritocracies we have in our society, I'm talking about high-frequency trading floors, high-end commercial Michelin-star kitchens, early-stage tech startups.
Yeah.
The kid who believes that skills are learnable and just works relentlessly almost always ends up beating the kid who coasts in on their pedigree.
And that brings us to the mathematical reality of this worldview, which is where it moves from philosophy into physics, the compounding effect.
Ooh, compounding, the magic word.
It is magic, but it has actual verifiable science behind it. You mentioned the habits movement earlier. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, has that brilliant observation that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Right.
Hustle culture, at its best, understands that outcomes are lagging indicators of systems.
Break down how that compounding actually works in real time, because we hear compound interest and we just think of money sitting in a bank. How does it apply to human effort?
It works through micro advantages. Let's say you get 1% better at a specific skill every single day.
Just 1%.
Just 1%. From the inside, from your perspective, it feels completely mechanical and often deeply boring. You don't feel any different on day 12 than you did on day 11.
Yeah, it just feels like a grind.
But you apply that tiny improvement consistently, and you reinvest the gains of your new competence into the next day's effort. The person doing this is basically invisible for 2 years. Nobody notices them. They are just grinding away in obscurity, dealing with a lot of frustration.
Right. They are in the trenches. No applause.
No applause at all. But then, because of the exponential curve of compounding, suddenly they hit a threshold.
And boom.
Boom. They become completely unaccountable to the normal laws of linear progress. They reach a level of mastery or market dominance that looks to an outside observer like overnight success or genetic genius.
But it wasn't genius at all.
No, it was built brick by brick. The hustle canon democratizes that math. It says you don't need to be a prodigy, you just need the willingness to be incredibly boring and incredibly consistent for a very long time.
The willingness to be incredibly boring for a very long time. I love that phrasing. And the irony is the people who sneer at this, the sophisticated cultural critics who roll their eyes at hustle culture and call it toxic, they often do so from a place of immense privilege.
So, completely.
Sneering at the grind often feels like a luxury belief held by people whose compounding was already done for them by their parents or their zip code or their trust fund.
That's a very sharp sociological observation. The safety net allows for the critique. And we also shouldn't forget that this idea of discipline isn't some new concept invented in a Silicon Valley incubator.
No, it goes way back.
It is ancient wisdom. If you read the book of Proverbs, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise." The Stoic philosophers 2,000 years ago wrote extensively about mastering your appetites, ordering the day, and resisting the urge to sleep in.
So hustle culture didn't invent the work ethic.
Not at all. It inherited it from scripture, from agriculture, from generations of human experience that realized a very blunt truth. You have to work diligently in the spring if you want to eat in the winter.
It dignifies the whole enterprise, really. When you wake up early to work on a difficult project, you aren't just following a social media fad. You are joining a very long, very resilient procession of human builders.
And there is a real tangible dignity in that effort.
Exactly. I think the anti-hustle movement sometimes makes it sound like work is only ever extraction. Like the corporate system is just a vampire pulling life force out of you.
Right, treating effort as purely negative.
But anyone who has actually built something hard, whether it's a small business, a house, or a novel, knows it works both ways. The sustained, difficult work builds the worker. You gain competence, and competence is a form of self-respect that you simply cannot buy. It has to be earned through friction.
And this touches on the concept of ambition itself. There is this very fashionable trend right now in wellness circles to pathologize ambition.
Oh, I see this all the time.
To look at anyone who wants to build something massive or anyone who works long hours voluntarily and say, oh, they're just compensating for a childhood wound, or they really just need therapy to deal with their insecure drive.
Right. Who hurt you that you feel the need to start a company?
Exactly. Now, to be fair, sometimes that is true. Trauma can absolutely be an engine.
For sure.
But often, this therapeutic dismissal is just condescension, dressed up as psychological insight. The hunger to build something larger than yourself, to test your absolute limits against a really difficult problem, to see what you are capable of. That is not a psychological disorder. It is a highly productive human hunger.
Yeah, we rely on it.
We do. The bridges we drive on, the medical cures we rely on, the electrical grids that power the devices we use to complain about capitalism, they were all built by people who pushed themselves through seasons of brutal effort that absolutely no modern wellness protocol would ever approve of.
That's such a good point. If a culture loses its respect for the grind, it doesn't actually become gentler or more enlightened. It just becomes softer in the exact places where it desperately needs to be strong.
Exactly.
And eventually, that culture just becomes completely dependent on the very builders it spends all its time mocking on the internet.
So if we are keeping a ledger, to summarize the first half, the grind delivers. Agency is real. Effort mathematically compounds. And discipline liberates you from the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
The ant is fundamentally a better role model than the sluggard.
Right. And yet we all know the dark side of this, because if you walk onto that exact same trading floor or into that exact same surgical ward or that exact same startup that is now 18 months in and flush with venture capital, you see the exact opposite data set.
You really do.
You see the keynote speaker's absolute nightmare.
You see the collateral damage. You see the managing director who has an enormous multi-million-dollar book of business, but whose teenage children refuse to speak to him because he hasn't been mentally present for a decade.
It's tragic.
It is. You see the founder who optimized every single hour of their day down to the minute, tracking their macros and their micro tasks, but who hasn't felt a single spontaneous moment of joy in 5 years. You see the person who conceived, believed, and achieved exactly what they set out to do, and they are standing in the very center of that massive achievement, feeling completely terrifyingly hollow.
Because somewhere along the way, while all that effort was brilliantly compounding in the bank account and the resume, the actual asset that was being spent down was the person themselves.
This is the fatal flaw of the grind. It works beautifully right up until it consumes the person doing the grinding.
So what's the mechanical reason for that?
The mechanical reason is that the doctrine of hustle culture has absolutely no internal principle, none whatsoever, that tells you when to stop.
It's all gas, no brakes.
Exactly. It only knows how to press the accelerator. It does not possess a brake pedal. And that isn't just a minor flaw in the execution of the philosophy. It is a massive gaping hole in the doctrine itself.
And that hole in the doctrine leads us directly, predictably, into the waiting arms of the second sermon, the anti-hustle movement, the wellness industry.
Yep, the pendulum swings.
Because nature abhors a vacuum, and something has to fill that void of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And again, just like we did with the hustle bros, we have to start by aggressively stripping away the caricature of the wellness movement.
Right. The caricature here is the perfectly able-bodied, highly privileged 20-something who rebrands their own avoidance of difficult tasks as healing.
Oh, the weaponized therapy speak.
Exactly. The person who uses the language of boundaries to just escape any form of obligation to their team. The person who confuses the complete absence of effort with the presence of peace.
I mean, we've all seen those TikToks too, right? Like, I'm protecting my peace today by ghosting my entire team and not doing the spreadsheet my boss asked for because spreadsheets lower my vibration.
Yes, the internet is full of that. But just as the guy renting the jet isn't the real argument for hustle culture, the person using boundaries to avoid basic responsibilities isn't the real argument for the anti-hustle movement.
Right, that's just the fringe.
If you strip away the pastel branding, the expensive incense, and the narcissism, the load-bearing claim of the wellness movement is incredibly profound.
It is?
A human being is not a production unit.
A human being is not a production unit. Let's really dig into the psychology of that. What happens to a person when they are treated like one?
A culture that insists on measuring people strictly by their output will eventually degrade the quality of that output, and it will destroy the people in the process. The anti-hustle movement introduces a radical accounting correction.
How so?
It claims that attention, not time, is your scarcest resource. It claims that presence isn't a form of laziness. It's the only place where human life actually happens. And most importantly, it claims that the self that does the achieving must be kept distinctly separate from the achievements themselves.
That concept right there, identity fusion, is so crucial. You are not your output.
It's foundational.
It sounds like something you'd read on a nice greeting card, but as you dig into the literature, it becomes a very serious clinical diagnosis very quickly. If your entire personality, your entire sense of self-worth is fused with your profit and loss statement or your job title, What happens mechanically in your brain when you have a down year?
It crashes.
Right. What happens when there's a corporate restructuring or a sudden health crisis or you finally take that retirement you've been working 40 years toward?
What happens is psychological collapse.
Yeah.
You discover that you didn't actually have a self that produced results. You had results that were wearing a self as a costume.
That is a chilling way to put it.
And when the results vanish, the self vanishes with them. Surviving unemployment is one thing. You can manage the finances of that. But surviving the unmasking of your identity is a full-blown existential crisis.
And the wellness industry points this out.
The anti-hustle literature is the only wing of the modern advice industry that is consistently, loudly sounding the alarm about this fusion. And it's an ancient warning. Every major wisdom tradition draws a hard line between the soul and its works.
Like the old quote about gaining the whole world.
Exactly. The phrase, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" isn't just a rhetorical, poetic question. It's a literal transaction that people attempt every single day in modern office parks, and the exchange rate is absolutely brutal.
And this brings up the whole idea of presence. The anti-hustle movement is huge on presence, mindfulness, being in the now. And I love the analogy used in the source material about the corridor versus the building.
Oh, the Eckhart Tolle concept.
Yeah, let me see if I can explain this, and you tell me if I have the mechanics right. The hustling, grinding mind basically lives in only two tenses. It lives in the glittering, anxious future, where the goal is, where the promotion is, where the payout is. Or it lives in the past, agonizing over mistakes and replaying failures.
Right, skipping the present entirely.
Exactly. And because of that, it treats the present moment just like a corridor. It's just this narrow, slightly annoying transitional hallway you have to rush through as efficiently as possible to get to the actual room, which is the future.
You have the mechanics exactly right. The philosopher Eckhart Tolle built his entire framework on correcting this specific cognitive error. Because the reality is, the corridor is the entire building.
Mind-blowing.
The present moment is the only thing you ever actually possess. The brain trick is this. Even if you achieve that massive future goal you are grinding toward, you are only going to experience that achievement in a future present moment.
Wow, yeah.
And if you haven't fundamentally changed your mindset, you will treat that present moment as just another corridor to the next goal. A person can literally spend 40 years in transit, rushing toward a life they never once actually occupy.
That is haunting. Spending 40 years in transit. And if we want empirical proof that this isn't just some abstract philosophical theory meant for monks, we just have to look at the ultimate terminal audit of human life.
You mean the hospice data?
Yes, the data from hospice workers. When you ask people at the very end of their lives what they regret, the data set is remarkably, almost devastatingly consistent.
So what do they say?
They never regret the deals that got away. They never regret the promotions they missed or the competitors who beat them to market by 6 months.
Never.
They regret that the working crowded out the living. They regret not having the courage to live a life true to themselves rather than true to the corporate expectations of others. They regret letting deep friendships fade away because they didn't have an immediate agenda item to discuss, so they just stopped calling.
It breaks your heart.
They regret not giving themselves permission to just be happy in the present tense.
Let me point out something crucial there. Every single one of those regrets is a presence failure. Not a single one is a production failure. We spend all of our prime years, all of our vigorous, healthy energy staring intensely at a scoreboard that the final audit of our life doesn't even bother to consult.
It's the ultimate misallocation of resources.
So when the anti-hustle movement accuses us of confusing the urgent with the important, it isn't just an aesthetic preference for yoga over spreadsheets. It's a hardcore accounting claim, and the people at the absolute end of the ledger keep confirming it.
Which brings us to how we actually manage our cognitive resources in the present. The anti-hustle movement talks constantly about boundaries. And as we discussed, critics often misinterpret this as a plea for laziness.
Right, the TikTok vibe.
But setting boundaries is really about resource allocation. It's the exact same discipline a good CEO applies to financial capital, just applied to human attention.
I want to push on that. Let's use an analogy. If you are managing your attention like a manic day trader, if you're spread out across 40 different positions, churning your portfolio with every single notification that pings on your phone, never holding on to a thought long enough for it to compound into actual deep work, you would be fired from any trading desk in the world.
Instantly.
Yet that's exactly how we run our minds in the modern workplace.
Exactly. We trade whole, unbroken hours of deep presence for tiny, fractional, heavily diluted minutes of yield, and we somehow book that on our internal ledger as productivity.
It's insane.
It is a terrible portfolio strategy for the human brain. So when authors like Mark Manson talk about deciding what you're willing to struggle for, or Mel Robbins talks about the let them theory, which is basically letting other people manage their own drama without absorbing it, they aren't telling you to stop trying.
No, they're saying the opposite.
They're telling you to engage in deliberate effort. They are advocating for chosen suffering instead of accidental suffering. They are saying you have to control what is yours, aggressively release what isn't, and stop hemorrhaging your vital life force into outcomes you don't even govern.
It's basically the serenity prayer repackaged for the modern corporate world. And a big part of that boundary setting has to be around relationships. Because somewhere along the line, the grind mutated and convinced us that human relationships are just instruments.
Oh, the networking mindset.
Yes. It's all networking. Every conversation is a potential node in a matrix. Dinner is a touch point. Friendship is just social capital. I feel like we've completely financialized human connection.
And that financialization is a profound corruption of the human spirit.
Well,
Not because persuasion or influence aren't real, valuable skills. They absolutely are. But because if every single relationship you have is just a means to an end, then no one in your life is actually loved for who they are.
not even yourself.
Especially not yourself. If you only value others for their utility, you eventually realize you only value yourself for your utility. The people standing around your deathbed will not be there because of your excellent email response rate or your LinkedIn reach.
God, I hope not.
The wellness industry is totally right to push back against this transactional mindset. When they tell you to put down your phone and just be with your family completely agenda-free, not trying to convert the moment into a photo opportunity or a networking win, they are returning you to the only kind of wealth that actually matters in the end.
But doing that requires real, genuine rest, which is something the grind just doesn't understand mechanically. Hustle culture views rest as just a pit stop to refuel the race car.
Right. Rest is the productivity hack.
Exactly. But the anti-hustle movement argues that rest isn't just the absence of work, it is the active presence of something else. I was really struck by the historical context in our source material here. The concept of the Sabbath taking one entire day in 7 completely off from production is essentially the original anti-hustle institution.
It was a literal mandate, a cultural and theological decree that production must halt.
Forced rest.
And the brilliance of the Sabbath is what it encodes into the psychology of the culture. When you are forced to stop working for 24 hours, it forces you to acknowledge a very humbling truth. You are not indispensable.
The world keeps spinning.
The world will keep spinning, the crops will keep growing, and the universe will sustain itself without your constant frantic input. Believing that the world depends on your ceaseless effort isn't actually diligence. It's a form of profound arrogance. It's the idolatry of your own hands.
Wow.
Today, a modern cardiologist has to literally prescribe rest to a burnout patient, prescribing as a medical necessity what their ancestors simply received as a cultural commandment. The wisdom didn't change, only the enforcement mechanism did.
And the physical body enforces it, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. The hustle mindset treats the human body like it's just a piece of hardware with a willpower throttle. It assumes fatigue is just a software bug you can patch with more caffeine, a cold plunge, and a better mindset.
But the body doesn't work that way.
Not at all. The physiological reality is that the body keeps the score, and the body has absolute veto power.
Let's talk about the biology of that. Sleep deprivation degrades your cognitive judgment with the exact same reliability and severity as drinking alcohol. If you wouldn't manage a fund drunk, you shouldn't manage it on 4 hours of sleep.
It's wild that we accept one but not the other.
Chronic, unrelenting stress literally rewires your endocrine system. It bathes your brain in cortisol, which impairs your prefrontal cortex. And that biological damage isn't magically reversed just because you get a fat quarterly bonus.
That body demands payment.
The body is a very patient, very meticulous auditor. It will extend you physiological credit for years, maybe even decades, but eventually it calls in the loan, and it usually calls it in at the worst possible hour. Every high-performance industry is littered with the medical charts of people who thought they could outwork their own biology.
You know, I actually have to laugh because I fell into this trap perfectly last week.
What happened?
I was trying to optimize my rest, so I bought one of those expensive smart rings.
Oh no, I see where this is going.
I woke up on Thursday feeling amazing, totally refreshed, ready to tackle the day. Then I opened the app, and it told me my recovery score was in the red at 42%. And instantly, my mood tanked. I felt exhausted. I literally let a piece of jewelry gaslight me into having a bad day because I had somehow failed at resting perfectly.
That is the ultimate modern irony. You turn the absence of work into a high-stakes performance metric.
Exactly. I gamified my sleep and lost. So, if we look at the second half of the ledger, the letting go delivers. Presence matters. Limits are a hard biological reality. You are not your output. The Sabbath is necessary.
And yet,
Again.
because just like hustle culture, the anti-hustle doctrine has its own casualty ward. It's quieter, it's less dramatic, but it's just as full. Because here is the mechanical failure of the wellness movement. Detachment without direction eventually curdles into drift.
Wait, expand on that. Detachment without direction curdles into drift. Are you saying you can have too many boundaries?
I'm saying a boundary drawn around an empty life defends nothing. If your entire philosophy is built on protecting your peace from absolutely every external demand, you eventually wake up and realize that those demands were the very things connecting you to the rest of humanity.
Oh, wow.
You achieve perfect peace, yes, but it is entirely indistinguishable from total isolation.
Peace indistinguishable from isolation. That's a heavy thought.
Caring about nothing is not enlightenment. It's just surrender wearing the expensive robes of enlightenment. The wellness doctrine is brilliant at telling you exactly how to stop, when to stop, and why stopping is medically healthy. But what it completely lacks is an internal principle for why you should have ever started in the first place. It cannot tell you what is worth building, what is worth suffering for, or what is worth dedicating your finite energy to. So once again, we find a gaping hole in the doctrine.
Okay, let me zoom out and synthesize where we are. We had these two half doctrines. The grind has a massive engine, but absolutely no brakes. It drives you into a wall.
Yep.
The letting go has fantastic brakes, but absolutely no engine. It leaves you stalled in the driveway. Each one has a hole exactly the shape of the other. You would think, logically, that a rational society would just combine them. We would synthesize them into one healthy, holistic philosophy of human endeavor.
But we didn't.
No. Instead, they formed a highly lucrative business model.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we have to stop being fair to both sides and start being ruthlessly honest about the economic ecosystem they operate in. Hustle culture and anti-hustle culture are not actually opponents fighting a philosophical war.
What are they then?
They are two divisions of the exact same commercial enterprise. They're running the oldest play in the history of commerce. They create the condition, and then they sell you the cure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's a symbiotic ecosystem. And it doesn't even require a conspiracy theory or a secret meeting of gurus in a smoke-filled room. The market just naturally figured out how to profit from the whiplash.
The pipeline is perfectly designed.
Think about the pipeline of a normal, well-intentioned person going through this system. They start out young, ambitious, maybe they just graduated, they buy into the hustle aisle, they listen to the podcast, they start grinding.
And it works.
It works. They get some success, they build a career, they make some money. But because it works, they double the dose, they grind harder, and suddenly it's year 8, and they are completely burned out. They're anxious, exhausted, physically sick, and feeling utterly empty inside the shell of their own success.
At which exact moment they are perfectly primed to become the ideal, high-paying customer for the wellness industry. The anti-hustle aisle welcomes them with open arms. They buy the books on breathwork. They pay thousands for the silent retreat in Sedona. They hire a coach to help them learn to set boundaries.
And this works too.
The relief is genuine and necessary. But actually, after 18 months of protecting their peace and doing the bare minimum, they start to get restless. The human drive to create returns. They realize they aren't building anything meaningful.
Yeah.
A low-grade guilt starts to creep in. They feel like they're wasting their potential.
And what happens next?
The guilt walks them directly back to the hustle aisle, where a newly rebranded, highly optimized productivity system is waiting for them to buy.
It's a perpetual motion machine of commerce. The burnout manufactured by the grind creates the ideal customer for the wellness industry. And the aimless drift manufactured by the wellness industry creates the ideal customer for the productivity industry.
The dark brilliance of it is that neither side has any commercial incentive whatsoever to actually cure the underlying condition. Because the condition is the business model.
Right. A fully integrated, healthy human being does not buy a 4 a.m. productivity course.
And they don't buy a $5,000 boundary retreat either. The oscillation, the swing, is where the profit lives. And if we look at the absolute core of this, underneath all the vocabulary and the branding, It is just one single human anxiety wearing two different masks. The core anxiety is, am I enough?
Let me make sure I follow that. The hustle aisle monetizes the fear that you aren't doing enough, that you're falling behind the competition, that you are lazy. And the wellness aisle monetizes the fear that you are losing yourself in the process, that you are being exploited, that you are missing out on life. But it's the exact same person feeling the exact same underlying fear of inadequacy, just directed at different targets.
Precisely. The behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman has a brilliant concept that explains the mechanics of this perfectly. It's called the focusing illusion.
How does that work?
He says that nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. Let's look at how the brain actually processes this. We have a limited bandwidth for attention. When you put a microscope over one specific anxiety, say your stagnant bank account or your lack of a promotion, your brain literally redirects cognitive resources away from your health, your family, your hobbies.
It creates tunnel vision.
It creates a temporary neurological reality where your career trajectory isn't just a part of your life, it becomes the entirety of your existence. So when the hustle pitch hits you in that exact moment, it feels like the cure to the universe because your brain has temporarily forgotten the rest of the universe exists.
That is wild. It's a literal biological blind spot.
And the exact same mechanism works in reverse. 6 months later, your bank account is fine, but you have a panic attack. Now your brain puts the microscope entirely on your stress levels. You forget about the very real need to pay a mortgage or fund a retirement, and your entire neurological reality becomes about escaping stress.
So the letting go pitch becomes irresistible.
They're selling the exact same product, temporary localized relief from whichever half of the fear is currently in focus.
It reminds me of an HVAC system in a poorly designed building where the heater and the air conditioner are stuck in a fight, constantly running at the exact same time.
That's a great analogy.
Like the heater blasts because it's too cold, then the AC kicks in because it's too hot, the room never actually gets comfortable, the machinery is wearing itself out into early failure, and the only entity getting rich is the electric company. We are literally paying for our own whiplash.
That is a perfect analogy. And this system is incredibly resilient because it operates like a virus that metabolizes its own cures.
What do you mean by that?
If a genuine, healthy corrective enters the cultural space, the ecosystem just absorbs it, strips out the disruptive parts, and turns it into a product.
Oh, like my smart ring.
Exactly like your smart ring.
Yeah.
Genuine rest enters the chat, and it immediately gets turned into recovery optimization. You are no longer just sleeping. You are performing a biological metric. Now you have a device gamifying your REM cycles, so you can actually fail at resting and feel guilty about it, which drives you back to the productivity mindset to fix your sleep.
And the same thing happens with presence. Presence gets absorbed by the wellness industry and turned into a 10-minute app-guided meditation streak that you have to log every morning. If you break the streak, the app sends you a sad notification, and now you are stressed about not being mindful enough.
The ultimate patron saint of this irony is the author Tim Ferriss.
Oh, the 4-hour work week guy.
Right. Back in the 2000s, he wrote The 4-Hour Workweek. His stated genuine intention was to help people escape the mindless grind of corporate busyness. He wanted people to automate their work so they could go learn to tango or kickbox.
Sounds great in theory.
But by writing that book, he accidentally launched the busiest, most crowded, most intensely optimized genre in the history of publishing. The system didn't fight his antidote. It acquired it, monetized it, and sold it back to us at a premium as life hacking.
You can see this entire dynamic perfectly compressed if you look at the life cycle of the modern internet guru. There is a totally predictable 10-year arc. I'm sure everyone listening can picture a specific influencer in their head right now.
Oh, we all know one.
Act 1, let's call him Gary. Gary is the relentless hustle evangelist. He's in his late 20s. His videos feature fast cuts, aggressive lighting. He's screaming into a microphone about 4 a.m. wake-ups, cold plunges, and having total contempt for the concept of balance. Sleep when you're dead, right?
Right, and he makes millions selling that certainty. But then comes Act 2. 5 to 7 years later, right on biological schedule, you get the vulnerable long-form post on Instagram. The lighting is softer. He's wearing a neutral-tone sweater. It's the confession of burnout. He admits to the panic attacks, the ruined marriage, the mysterious autoimmune health scare.
And then comes Act 3, the pivot. Same exact platform, same massive audience, same high production values. But now Gary is selling the breathwork course. Now he's leading the trauma release retreats.
And nobody calls him out.
That's the fascinating part. The audience doesn't punish him for the massive hypocrisy because the audience is writing the exact same physiological pipeline just a few years behind him. The guru successfully monetizes the wound on the way in, and they monetize the healing on the way out.
It is a closed loop of continuous monetization. And we have to talk about the accelerant in all of this, which is the algorithm, the social media feed, the distribution layer of this entire advice economy is algorithmically designed to prevent any kind of nuance or synthesis from ever reaching your brain.
Let's dig into the math of the feed. How does it actively prevent synthesis?
Because it optimizes for one metric: engagement. And neuroscience tells us that engagement requires arousal, meaning a heightened state of emotion, whether that's inspiration, anger, or fear.
So nuance is boring to a computer.
Arousal requires extremity. A nuanced message like, work hard in the appropriate season but rest when your body needs it, is a terrible hook for a video. It does not trigger an arousal state. It dies in the algorithm.
Yeah.
But extreme statements like, sleep is for the weak, or quit your toxic job today and move to a cabin, those trigger massive arousal. They go viral. So the extremes become the defining characteristics each camp, pushing the moderate voices out entirely.
And the feed personalizes the trap, right?
Yeah.
It learns which anxiety you are currently focused on. If I'm feeling stressed one morning and I linger on a burnout video for just 2 extra seconds, the algorithm detects that micro-hesitation. It registers my flinch.
And it pounces.
And within 10 minutes, it floods my feed with anti-hustle content. It surrounds me in an echo chamber that insists the whole world is toxic. It keeps me in a state of hyperarousal.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that this isn't just an individual trap. It's a macro-cultural fractal. This oscillation happens to entire generations. If you pull the lens back on the last 80 years, we swing wildly as a society.
Walk me through that.
We went from the intense post-war corporate diligence of the 1950s, the organization man, straight into the dropout counterculture of the late 60s and 70s. Then the pendulum swung back to the aggressive yuppies and Wall Street hustle of the 1980s, which produced the detached slackers and grunge movement of the 1990s.
And then the tech boom brought back the hustle, which evolved into the hyper-optimized girl boss and rise and grind era of the 2010s, which predictably crashed during the pandemic, leading directly into quiet quitting and the lying flat movement. And now, predictably, as the economy tightens, we're swinging right back into a hardcore, AI-driven productivity renaissance.
It's a metronome. And every time society swings, the commentary class acts like it's some grand novel awakening. Finally, we have figured out the truth about work.
But we haven't.
No, we haven't. We just changed the costumes and the vocabulary. And the tragic cost of this constant generational alternation is that we write off the accumulated wisdom of the previous generation as toxic ideology. The slacker mocks the yuppie. The quiet quitter mocks the girl boss. Because of this arrogance, we are forced to relearn at a massive retail price what we used to know wholesale. That effort deeply matters, and that effort has a biological boundary.
Okay, so if the system is rigged, if the algorithm demands extremity, and the gurus are just monetizing the swing and society is trapped in a metronome, what are we supposed to do? Everyone says the answer is just finding balance. Do I just need to find better work-life balance? Because honestly, trying to balance everything is exhausting me even more.
I'm glad you brought that up because the word balance is the ultimate trap. It is the boring, middle-of-the-road conclusion everyone expects, and it is completely wrong.
Wait, balance is a myth? Explain that.
Balance is a myth. When people try to achieve daily balance, what they're actually doing is taking the exact same massive oscillation, the exact same cultural whiplash, and miniaturizing it into a 24-hour period.
Oh man, so instead of burning out over 10 years, I'm burning out by 4 p.m.
Precisely. Daily balance creates what I call the permanent half jog. If you try to perfectly balance every single day, 8 hours of crushing it at work, followed by perfectly present parenting, followed by an hour of optimized fitness, followed by mindful meditation, you fail at all of it.
You just end up feeling guilty all day.
You are just guilty at your desk because you aren't with your family, and then you are guilty at the dinner table because you are secretly thinking about the emails you didn't answer. You never fully sprint because you are trying to pace yourself.
Yeah.
And you never fully rest because you are anxious about falling behind. You are just mediocre at both by design.
That describes the lived reality of almost every professional I know. The permanent half jog. Always a little tired, always a little guilty. So if the exit from the trap isn't balance, what is it?
The true exit is rhythm. It is sequence.
Rhythm and sequence, a time to build and a time to rest.
This is deeply ancient, agrarian wisdom. Think of the famous passage in the book of Ecclesiastes. To everything, There is a season, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted.
Right.
Now read that closely. It does not say you should plant moderately in the morning while simultaneously harvesting moderately in the afternoon. That's a recipe for agricultural disaster and human starvation. An agrarian farmer understands that you plant furiously, with relentless intensity, working from sunup to sundown in the spring. You give it absolutely everything. And then, when the season turns, you genuinely, completely rest in the winter. You let the field go fallow.
Okay, this is the master key to the whole debate. Hustle culture is essentially springtime wisdom. Everything they say about agency, discipline, the compounding effect, the ant, it is 100% true and absolutely necessary during planting season. If you don't hustle in the spring, you die in the winter.
Exactly. And the anti-hustle movement is winter wisdom. Everything they say about presence, biological limits, identity fusion, the Sabbath, it is 100% true and absolutely necessary during the fallow season. The catastrophe happens when we try to adopt either of these seasonal wisdoms as a permanent year-round lifestyle.
Because hustling year-round is like a farmer trying to plow frozen dirt in January. You don't grow any crops, you just snap the plow and destroy the soil. But practicing anti-hustle year-round is like meditating in the field during April. You will feel very peaceful and highly evolved right up until you starve to death.
The word lifestyle is the trap. We think we have to brand ourselves permanently as a hustler or a mindfulness practitioner. But the rhythm actually exists in nested gears. This is a great way to visualize how to apply this to modern life. You have multiple gears of rhythm turning at the exact same time at different speeds.
Break down the gears for me. What does a nested rhythm look like in practice?
The smallest gear is the daily rhythm. You sprint while you're awake, and you recover fully while you're asleep. Biology enforces that one strictly. Then you zoom out to the weekly gear. You have 6 days of effort and 1 day of Sabbath where production completely halts. Zoom out again to the yearly gear. You might have 3/4 of intense corporate push, followed by a fallow month or a genuine 2-week vacation where you actually disconnect the email from your phone.
And the largest gear?
The largest gear is the decade. Human lives have chapters. You have years dedicated to building, risking, and grinding. Say, your late 20s when you are establishing a career or starting a company. Those are planting years, and they must naturally be followed by years dedicated to consolidating, stabilizing, and focusing on family or health. Those are harvesting years.
When you look at the internet through the lens of these nested gears, almost every single shouting match on social media just dissolves into a massive category error. The hustle guru is screaming about the truth of the season gear, how to launch a product, but the audience is desperately trying to apply it to their entire decade. The wellness influencer is talking about the necessity of the recovery gear, but a 23-year-old is applying it to their sprint, refusing to work hard on a Tuesday.
That is exactly the friction. You have to keep all the gears turning simultaneously. You can sprint intensely on a Tuesday afternoon, which is the daily gear, while still firmly keeping a Sabbath on Sunday, the weekly gear, while still recognizing that you're in a massive building decade of your overall career, the decade gear.
And this sequencing is what allows the two halves of our original debate to finally justify each other. Rest without a mission isn't peace. It's just drifting. Mission without rest isn't success. It's self-destruction. But when you sequence them properly, the rest is earned and sweet, completely free of the guilt of the idle. And the work is bounded and sustainable, completely free of the panic of the desperate.
Stephen Covey understood this decades ago with his habit, sharpen the saw. The modern interpretation is that sharpening the saw is a break from work. But Covey meant that the renewal is a necessary, integrated part of the effectiveness. It isn't an escape from the work. The saw exists to cut wood, and the sharpening exists solely so the saw can cut better tomorrow. It's an integrated rhythmic system.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now. Think about your own life today as you're listening to this deep dive. Have you been running that permanent half jog? Are you never fully sprinting because you're exhausted, but never fully resting because you're anxious about your inbox? Because if so, you are participating in a massive crisis in corporate leadership right now. It seems like modern executives only know how to call a sprint.
It is the only tempo the modern corporation recognizes. A leader will stand up in a town hall meeting and demand a brutal, all-out push for Q3. We have to hit these numbers, all hands on deck, and people will rally and do it. But those same leaders completely lack the courage, the vocabulary, or the metrics to stand up after Q3 is over and declare a season of recovery, to say the sprint is done, we won, now the field goes fallow for a month. I expect you to work at 40% capacity and go home at 3 p.m.
And because leaders don't explicitly enforce that rest, what happens to the organization?
The rest gets taken anyway, but it gets taken by force majeure. It arrives as massive, unexpected employee attrition. It arrives as catastrophic, multi-million-dollar errors made by depleted minds who missed a detail in a contract. It arrives as physical collapse. If you don't schedule the maintenance on the machine will schedule the maintenance for you, and it will guarantee that it happens at the most expensive, disruptive possible time.
So what does this all mean? If we accept that rhythm is the answer, how do we actually execute this? I don't want to just give the listener another complicated productivity system to track. What are the practical steps?
It requires 3 specific, highly difficult disciplines. And discipline number 1 is diagnosis. You have to know which season you're actually in right now.
That sounds simple, but I bet it's incredibly hard.
It is the step almost everyone skips because no one in adult life assigns it to you. You have to sit down and ask, what is the current chapter of my life for? Is this a season to build the startup and sacrifice sleep? Is this a season to pull back and raise the toddler? Is this a season to recover from a massive personal loss or illness? You cannot ask the internet, should I be grinding right now? Because the internet does not know your specific biological and familial context.
Right, and you brought up something earlier in our notes about the tragedy of the extended sprint. You see these founders or executives who are grinding away in year 11 of a season that actually logically ended in year 7. The financial crisis is over, the company is stable, the money is already made. Nothing external requires them to keep grinding, but they do it because they literally don't know who they would be at a lower throttle. They are terrified of the silence that comes with the harvest.
Which is why diagnosing your season often requires outside help. Asking a spouse, a long-term mentor, or a close friend is usually vastly more accurate than self-diagnosis. Because you are auditing your own internal intentions and fears, but they are auditing your actual visible outcomes. They can see when the field has given all it's going to give. They can see that the crop is dying on the vine while you are still trying to plant seeds.
Okay, discipline number 2. Once you diagnose the season, commit entirely. If you realize you are legitimately in a planting season, you plant. You work fiercely, unapologetically, without the daily guilt about achieving perfect balance. Remember, balance is measured in decades, not Tuesdays.
This is what we call the concept of clean ferocity. If you have diagnosed the season and negotiated it with the stakeholders in your life, your spouse, your team, saying, for the next 6 months, I am launching this product and I'm going to be working crazy hours, you can work with a clean conscience. You don't have to perform this weird, exhausting theater of regret every time you miss dinner, because the boundary was set clearly at the seasonal level.
That makes total sense. But honestly, the flip side is probably even harder for high achievers. If you diagnose that it is fallow time, if you are in a season of rest, you have to actually rest. Without the smuggled laptop hidden in the beach bag on vacation, without turning your recovery into an optimized project with spreadsheets tracking your meditation minutes.
Yes, the discipline of resting without utility. Modern knowledge workers profoundly struggle with this. We desperately want to rest in order to produce more later. We want to recharge our batteries so we can go back to the factory on Monday and work harder. But if you are only resting to produce, you haven't actually left the factory. You've just moved the machinery into your living room. True rest has to be good in and of itself. You have to be able to stop for reasons that never, ever appear on a corporate performance review.
You have to enjoy the sunset just because it's a sunset, not because viewing it lowers your cortisol by 12% so you can code faster tomorrow.
Exactly. Which brings us to discipline number 3, which is the foundational bedrock of all of this. Refuse the fusion.
Refuse the fusion. Like, how do we actually untangle our identity from our output?
This raises an important question, which is where you actually anchor your identity. Whatever season you are in, whether you are grinding to make payroll or taking 6 months off to heal, the core self must remain completely distinct from its output. The planter is not the crop. If your self-worth is entirely fused to the scoreboard, you will never be able to commit to the rhythm. You will be blown violently back and forth between the hustle aisle and the wellness aisle by every single wind of economic fear.
I think about the anchors people use. If it's not a theological anchor, which is the oldest and sturdiest answer for a lot of human history, the idea that your worth was fundamentally settled by a creator before you ever produced a single spreadsheet, then it has to be anchored deeply in your family, your community, your vocation, or something you love purely for its own sake. But it absolutely has to be anchored deeper than the market, because the market will eventually crash.
If you are anchored securely outside of the economic system, You can build a massive company without desperation, because the building isn't your desperate justification for existing. And equally importantly, you can stop, walk away, and rest without feeling like you are vanishing, because you were never just the sum of what you made.
We have covered incredible ground today. We moved way past that cheap, superficial internet debate of hustle versus wellness. We recognize the psychological trap of this symbiotic ecosystem that just wants to monetize our whiplash and sell us the swing. And we found that the actual exit isn't an app or a hack, it's an ancient rhythm of seasons.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we consume advice. We have to move from asking, is this guru's advice true, to asking, which season of life is this advice the truth of?
Exactly. So for you listening right now, do not burn your habit tracker just yet. And don't go put a non-refundable deposit down on a silent retreat in the mountains. Not yet. Your immediate assignment for this Monday morning is to sit down in a quiet room and ask yourself the one question that no algorithm can ever sell you. What season am I actually in? Not the season you're performing for your boss, not the season your social media feed is rewarding you for, but the real one. The one your body and your family are demanding.
Figure out that season, accept it, and then live it all the way to its absolute edge. The wisdom was never divided, only we were.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've explored today. What if the real danger of the modern world isn't actually that we are working too hard or that we are resting too little? What if the actual profound tragedy is that we have become completely emotionally illiterate to the passage of time? We treat our lives like a flat line on a corporate productivity chart that just has to keep going up and to the right forever. But we are not charts. We are a living, breathing ecosystem. What would change for you tomorrow morning if you stopped treating your energy like a battery that constantly needs to be optimized and started treating it like a tide that is meant to come in and meant to go out? If your dashboard is broken and all the dials are spinning wildly, maybe it's time to stop looking at the dashboard and start looking at the sky to see what season it actually is.
Thanks for joining our deep dive.